Every Tuesday morning, in the small public library of Trout Creek, Montana, a 53-year-old man sits down alone in the children's section. He doesn't have children. He doesn't have grandchildren. He never checks anything out. He just picks a picture book off the low shelf, opens it to the first page, and sits there looking at it the way most people only look at things they've lost. For 9 months, the young librarian watched him do this and said nothing. On the 10th month, she finally asked. What he showed her from inside his wallet that morning would send both of them on a search that covered 30 years. 2 continents and 1 crayon drawing the size of a playing card, made by a 7-year-old girl in a city most Americans have already forgotten, in a war most history books treat as a footnote. They assumed that if an answer existed at all, it was buried somewhere on the other side of the world. They were wrong. The answer was much, much closer than that. And it had been waiting, quietly, patiently, for 15 years. Trout Creek, Montana is the kind of town that exists because the mountains decided to put a valley there, and somebody stubborn enough decided to stay. 300 people, give or take a hard winter. A gas station, a grain elevator, a diner called the Griddle, and a single-room public library that doubles as the town's warming shelter when the temperature drops past 20 below. Addie Crane runs that library by herself, 6 days a week, and has since she got the job at 22 and discovered, to her genuine surprise, that she was good at it. She's 24 now, with her dark hair always escaping whatever she's pinned it into, and a cardigan she's reworn so many times the elbows have gone thin. She knows every regular by name, by preference, by the particular way each one moves through the stacks. Frank Dees does not move through the stacks the way anyone else does. He comes in every Tuesday at 9:15 when the library opens. He nods to Addie at the desk. He hangs his coat, a canvas barn coat with a Trout Creek feed and grain patch on the sleeve, on the hook by the door, and then he walks, without hesitation, past the new releases, past the large print section, past the local history shelf, and sits down in the children's section. He fits himself into the small blue chair that is technically meant for someone significantly shorter than he is, and picks a picture book off the low shelf. Frank Dees is 53 years old and built like a man who stopped arguing with the weather decades ago and just decided to be stronger than it. His hair is dark, going grey at the edges. His jaw is heavy and his hands large, rough, the hands of someone who works with them, hold those children's picture books, with a care that is completely at odds with everything else about his physical presence. He always picks books with a particular kind of cover. Addie noticed this by the 3rd week. A house, a son, a tree, a family. Any variation on that image and he'll pick it up. Every other kind of cover and he'll pass right by. He sits for 40 minutes to an hour, looks at the pictures, not reading the words, she's realized, just looking at the illustrations, and then sets the book back exactly where he found it. Collects his coat, nods to Addie again, and leaves. For 9 months she watched this happen and said nothing, because her mother raised her to understand that some things people do in libraries are private, and the first rule of working in one is knowing when to leave a person alone with whatever they came in needing. On the 10th month, something changes. Frank picks up a book, opens to the first page and stops, sits completely still. And when Addie looks over from the desk, she sees something she has never seen in 9 months of watching him. He's crying. Quietly, privately, the way men of a certain generation cry when they think nobody is close enough to notice. Jaw set, eyes bright, not a sound. Addie closes her laptop, walks over, and sits down in the other small blue chair across from him. "Mr. Dees," she says, "can I ask you something?" Frank closes the book, sets it in his lap, looks at the cover for a moment. A simple illustrated house, yellow sun, green tree, a family of 4 standing in the yard, before he answers. "You've been letting me sit here 9 months without asking," he says. "What changed today?" "You're crying," Addie says simply. "And I think maybe you've needed somebody to ask for longer than 9 months. Frank is quiet. His thumb runs along the spine of the picture book once, twice. Then he reaches into the inside pocket of his barn coat, folded carefully beside his chest, and takes out his wallet. Old black leather, worn to the color of creek mud at the fold. He opens it, and from behind his driver's license, draws out something small, a piece of paper laminated now. The lamination yellowed and bubbled at one corner from age, but the contents still visible. He hands it to Addie. It's a child's drawing, crayon on a scrap of paper no bigger than a playing card. A house, a sun, a tree, 4 stick figures standing in front, the tallest one holding hands with the smallest. "She gave me this in 1993, Frank says. I was 21 years old. I never got her name." Addie looks at the drawing for a long time. The crayon house, the crayon sun, the 4 small figures with their hands linked. Then she looks up at a 53-year-old man folded into a child's blue chair, and she understands all at once what she has been watching every Tuesday for 9 months. He wasn't reading picture books, he was visiting. Frank doesn't tell the whole story in one sitting. It comes out over the following 3 Tuesdays, in pieces, while Addie makes coffee in the library's small back room, and Frank sits in the blue chair and talks to the shelf of picture books the way some people talk to the middle distance, when the thing they're saying is hard to say facing anyone directly. "I was Army, 10th Mountain Division," he says. "I was 21, and I thought I knew what a war zone looked like from training, and I did not. Mogadishu in 1993 was nothing like anything I was prepared for. The noise alone, and then, between the noise, the quiet, which was somehow worse. His unit was assigned to a humanitarian corridor, one of the routes aid workers used to move food through parts of the city. Mostly logistics, mostly standing posts, the kind of work that feels less like combat and more like trying to hold a finger in a dam while the water keeps finding new ways around you. On one of those posts, on a day that started slow and went bad fast, Frank took cover in a doorway during a sudden burst of street fire, routine by Mogadishu standards, chaotic by every other standard Frank had. In that doorway, already pressed against the wall, was a little girl, 7, maybe 8, Frank says. I couldn't tell. She was small. She didn't run when I came in, which surprised me. She just looked at me. Big dark eyes, not scared, exactly. More like she'd seen enough by then that one more soldier in her doorway wasn't the most alarming thing she could imagine. He pauses. She had a stub of crayon in her hand. She'd been drawing on the back of some kind of paper. I couldn't tell what the front said. And while I waited for the street to clear, she finished the drawing. A house, a sun, a tree, 4 people. He looks at the picture books. Same as every one of these covers. Why 4 people? Addie asks. I don't know, Frank says. I never found out. My Somali was non-existent. Her English was 2 words, maybe 3. He's quiet a moment. When it was clear enough to move, I started to go, and she held the drawing out to me, pressed it into my hand. And she said, his voice catches slightly, for you, those 2 words. That was all. You kept it. I've kept it 30 years. There's something else, Frank says, the 4th Tuesday. Something I haven't told anyone. Addie waits. When I left that doorway, Frank says, I looked back at her, and I said something. My Somali was useless, but I was 21 and I wasn't thinking in practical terms. I said I'd come back. Pointed at myself, pointed at the doorway, made some gesture that I hoped meant I'll come back to check on you. Whether she understood it, I'll never know. Did you go back? The operation tempo didn't allow for it. And then the situation in the city deteriorated fast, and then we were pulled, and then... He stops. Then I was home. And she was there and I was here, and there was no mechanism for a 21-year-old infantryman to go back to a city he'd been pulled out of and knock on a doorway and find a little girl he never knew the name of. But you kept the drawing. I kept the drawing, Frank says. And every year I told myself I'd figure out some way to find out what happened to her. Whether she made it through the rest of that year. Whether she grew up. Whether those 4 stick figures in that drawing made it through along with her. He looks at his hands. 30 years of telling myself that. And sitting in your children's section every Tuesday, because it was the closest thing I had to keeping her company somehow. Which I know makes no rational sense. It makes complete sense, Addie says, and means it. That Tuesday before he leaves, Frank does something he has never done in 30 years. He leaves the drawing behind. He presses it into Addie's hands, the way you trust. Someone with something fragile when you've been carrying it alone too long and your arms are getting tired, and asks her to keep it safe until next week. Why? She asks. Frank pulls on his coat. Because 30 years, he says, might be long enough to carry something alone. That evening, Addie locks up the library and sits alone at her desk for a long time before she puts her coat on. In the bottom drawer of the desk, under a stack of overdue notice forms, she keeps meaning to print. There's a letter from the University of Michigan, an acceptance letter to a doctoral program in library science, full funding, the kind of opportunity she has worked toward for the better part of 6 years. She got it 4 months ago. She hasn't told her mother. Her mother is 58, lives 12 miles up a road that gets impassable in February, and has a bad hip and worse health insurance, and exactly one person she relies on for the things a bad hip makes difficult. Addie has told herself for 4 months that she is waiting for the right time to have that conversation. The enrollment deadline is in 11 weeks. On the desk in front of her, Frank's drawing. One small piece of paper that crossed 30 years and 2 continents because a 7-year-old girl decided a moment mattered. In the drawer beneath her hand, her letter. One envelope that has traveled exactly nowhere in 4 months because a 24-year-old woman keeps deciding the moment doesn't. Not yet. She picks up the drawing, careful with the yellowed lamination, and turns it over. On the back, in a child's shaky English printing, smudged but still legible after 3 decades, for you, Addie sits with those 2 words for a long time. Then she closes the drawer, puts on her coat and makes a decision, not about her own letter. Not yet. About his. She's going to find that girl. Before we go any further, if you're watching this from a small town where the library doubles as the warming shelter, the meeting hall and half the town's memory, tell us where you're from in the comments below. Because everything that happens next happens for one reason. A small-town librarian who refused to let a dead end be the end. The following week, Addie spends her lunch hours doing what librarians are, it turns out. Exceptionally well trained to do. Research. She starts where the records are, with the large refugee resettlement organizations in Minneapolis and St. Paul, home to the biggest Somali-American community in the country. She writes careful emails. A girl, approximately 7 or 8 years old, October 1993. Mogadishu, near a district Frank can still name from memory. A crayon drawing. 2 words of English, for you. Then she waits. The first reply takes 9 days. And it is kind and it is honest. Without a name, a family name, a camp registration, anything at all. There is nothing to search. The second reply is kinder and harder. Civil records from Mogadishu in that period, the caseworker writes, essentially do not exist. The war didn't just take the buildings. It took the paperwork that proved people were ever there. A third organization never replies at all. 3 weeks pass. Addie drafts an email to Frank twice. I tried. I'm sorry. The trail is 30 years cold. And deletes it twice, and then on a grey Wednesday afternoon, A caseworker in St. Paul she has never spoken to forwards her original email with a single line attached. Try Hoden in Bozeman. She runs family tracing for East African communities across Montana. If anyone has heard a story like this one, it's her Bozeman. 60 miles from Trout Creek, Addie sends the email on a Thursday afternoon. She doesn't tell Frank. She doesn't want to open a door she isn't sure she can see anything through yet. The reply comes Monday morning. It's longer than she expected, and it begins with a sentence that makes her stand up from her desk. This is not the first time someone has asked us to look for this particular story. The coordinator at the Bozeman organization, a woman named Hodan, who has worked in refugee family tracing for 15 years, explains it carefully over the phone while Addie sits at the library desk with the door closed and her hand pressed flat against her sternum like she's trying to keep something from moving too fast. Here's a woman in Bozeman. Her name is Amara. She is 38 years old, a community health worker, resettled from a Kenyan refugee camp in 2009 after years of displacement. She has, in the years since arriving in Montana, tried twice through informal channels to trace the memory of an American soldier who sheltered with her in a doorway in Mogadishu in 1993, sat with her while gunfire moved through the street outside, and left with her drawing in his hand. She remembered his face. She did not know his name. She only knew he was young and he was frightened, and he stayed calm for her sake. And when he left, he turned back and made a gesture she always understood to mean, "I will try to come back." She never forgot that gesture, Hodan says. She's spoken about it in our community sessions. She said it was the first time during that whole period that she believed someone might actually try. Addie closes her eyes. "Can I bring someone to meet her?" she asks. Frank is quiet for a very long time after Addie tells him. They're sitting in the children's section, same as always. The small blue chairs, the picture books at eye level. Frank is holding the laminated drawing in both hands and not looking at it. "She's alive," he says finally. "She's alive," Addie says. "She's in Bozeman. She's been there 15 years. She works with families. She looked for me. Twice she didn't have a name." Frank sets the drawing down on the shelf beside him carefully, the way he always handles it. 30 years, he says. "I've been 60 miles from her for 15 years. Neither of them says anything for a moment. "Will you come with me?" Frank asks. "To Bozeman." Addie looks at the drawing. The crayon house, the sun, the tree, the 4 figures with their hands linked. "Yes," she says. "I'll drive." The meeting happens on a Saturday in a small community center in Bozeman that smells like cardamom and floor wax. Amara is 38, small and composed, with the particular quality of stillness that comes from a person who has survived enough chaos to know how to be quiet inside it. When Frank walks in, she looks at him for a long moment, and Frank looks back. And the 30 years between a doorway in Mogadishu and a community center in Montana compress into something neither one of them has a word for. "I kept it," Frank says, and holds out the drawing. Amara looks at it. Her own drawing, in her own 7-year-old hand, returned to her across 30 years and 2 continents. "I remember making this," she says softly, "in careful English that carries the shape of many languages inside it. I remember thinking, if I give him something, maybe he will remember there was a person here. Not just a place, a person." "I remembered," Frank says. "Every day for 30 years they sit. Someone brings tea, and for a while neither of them tries to compress 30 years into sentences, because some things refuse to be compressed. Then Frank asks the question he has carried even longer than the drawing. "The 4 people," he says, "in the picture. I've wondered for 30 years. Who are they?" Amara is quiet for a moment. Then she touches the figures one at a time, left to right, the way you greet people. "My mother," she says. "My father. My little brother, Yusuf. He was 4. Her finger stops on the smallest figure, the one holding the tallest figure's hand. And me. The house, she explains, was not their house. Their house was already gone by that October. The house in the drawing was the house that came after, the one her mother promised they would have again when the war was over. When it is bad, her mother used to tell them, draw where we are going, not where we are. So that is what I drew, Amara says. Where we were going. Frank looks down at the drawing in his hands, the yellow sun, the green tree, the four figures holding onto each other, and he knows, the way you know weather before it arrives, that the next thing she says is going to change what he has been carrying for 30 years. My father and Yusuf did not reach it, she says quietly. The war took them the following year. My mother and I made it out to Kenya, to the camp, and then much later here. She looks at the drawing for a long moment. Everything from before was lost. The photographs, the papers, everything. A pause. That drawing is the only picture in the world of the four of us together. Frank Dees is 53 years old and built like a man who stopped arguing with the weather decades ago, and he cannot say a single word. For 30 years, Amara says, I believed it was gone. Like them, but it was not gone. It was being carried. A man on the other side of the world was keeping my family safe in his wallet, and he did not even know their names. Then she does the thing nobody in that room expects. She turns the drawing over, reads in her own childhood handwriting the two words that crossed a war, an ocean, and 30 years for you. I wrote the truth when I was 7, she says, and presses the drawing back into his hands. It was for you. It is still for you. You have kept them safe all this time. I would like you to keep them a little longer. If this story has reached you the way it reached that small room in Bozeman, take 1 second to like this video and subscribe. It genuinely helps these stories find the people who need them. And this one isn't quite finished. Here is what Addie Crane carries with her now. Every time she opens the bottom drawer of the library desk and looks at the letter from the University of Michigan, the things we carry quietly for years, the promises we make in doorways, the drawings we keep in wallets, the letters we leave in drawers, are not burdens. They are proof that we recognized something, worth carrying in the first place. Frank Dees spent 30 years believing that a child's crayon drawing was the only thing he could do with a promise he never got the chance to keep. He was wrong. The drawing wasn't a substitute for the promise. It was the promise, kept faithfully, carried faithfully, across every year and every mile between a doorway in Mogadishu and a library in Montana. And some doors, Addie has finally understood, you have to open yourself. Nobody is going to knock from the other side. The following Sunday, Addie drives the 12 miles up the road to her mother's house. She brings the letter, the actual envelope, 4 months old and still crisp because drawers preserve the things we hide in them. Her mother reads it at the kitchen table with her glasses on, reads it twice. Seth, sit down. 4 months, she says. It isn't a question. I was waiting for the right time. No, her mother says, not unkindly. You were waiting for me to stop needing you. And I'm not going to stop, Addie. That was never going to change. So it can't be the thing that decides your life. They talk for 2 hours. About the hip. About February and the road. About the neighbor who plows it anyway. About Sunday video calls. About the 1,700 miles between Trout Creek and Ann Arbor. None of it is simple. All of it, it turns out, is solvable. And then her mother says the thing Addie writes down that night and keeps, the way Frank kept a drawing. I've known for months something was waiting to be said. I was just waiting for you to be ready. 3 days before the enrollment deadline, Addie mails her acceptance. Frank still comes to the library every Tuesday at 9:15. He still hangs the barn coat on the hook by the door. He still folds himself into the small blue chair. But he doesn't search the shelf anymore. The houses, the suns, the trees, the families on the covers. He doesn't have to. because on the wall of the children's section of the Trout Creek Public Library, hung low at exactly the eye level of a 7-year-old, there is a small framed drawing. A house, a yellow sun, a green tree, 4 figures holding hands, the tallest holding on to the smallest. Frank asked Amara before he hung it there. She said her mother's old rule had settled the question long ago. Draw where we are going. And where the drawing was going, it turned out, was a warm room full of picture books in a town that stays. There are copies now. Of course, one behind Frank's driver's license, where the original spent 30 years in the dock, and one in the living room of Amara's mother, in Bozeman. But the original hangs where children can see it. Amara visits Trout Creek in the spring. She doesn't come alone. Her mother, silver-haired now, small and straight-backed, stands in front of the framed drawing for a long time. The only picture in the world of her whole family, hanging on a library wall in Montana, in the town of the soldier who carried it home. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't need to. Then Amara sees the little blue chair and laughs, and says something in Somali that Hodan translates with a smile. He sat smaller than he looks. If there is something you have been carrying quietly, a drawing in a wallet, a letter in a drawer, a name you haven't said out loud to the right person yet, let tonight be your reminder. The distance between where you are and where that thing needs to be is almost always shorter than the silence makes it seem. Sometimes it's 30 years, sometimes it's 60 miles, and sometimes it's 12 miles up a bad road to your mother's kitchen table. Has something you carried for years ever found its way back to where it belonged? Tell us your story in the comments. We read every one. Thank you for spending this evening with us. We'll see you in the next story.